Boker Tov, good morning to all those who are starting to join us. Trying to breathe easy this morning. I hope that you can do that too. So on this Thursday, 13th of ER, almost the middle of the month, looked like a full moon to me, so I thought maybe we were even a day ahead of ourselves. See the moon last night? It was beautiful. Boker Tov, good morning. It's wonderful to see everybody as we gather. We still have the better part of a minute to come together this morning. It is good to start on time. Nice to make use of those things we can make decisions about, isn't it? You know, just to take a second and decide that we're going to dedicate it to a particular purpose. Sometimes easier said than done. Just even being a place doesn't really give us an opportunity to let go of the other things going on in our world and actually focus on that place. But I hope we can do that together this morning. Boker Tov. Boker Tov from Temple Sinai. Good morning and welcome to our morning Sinai streams, the opportunity provided by Temple Sinai of Toronto for us to connect, to reflect, and to remember. This morning is another lovely day, beginning of a Thursday morning, market days in ancient times, and thus the tradition of reading from the Torah during weekday mornings, the Monday and the Thursday, in addition to Shabbat. And so this morning, we focus again on our Torah portion for this morning. And though there's so much, it's just such a rich Torah portion, as so many of them are, I really want to go back this morning to the chapter 23 of the book of Leviticus that describes the festival calendar. That while, as we noted on Monday, and if you want to hear that, you can go back and check it out on Facebook, that it does talk about Shabbat and gives us an interesting new window on Shabbat, that in addition, it goes through and describes the biblical holidays. And of course, it's a reminder of how much our calendar has evolved. That of course we see neither Chanukah nor Purim, and not Hanukkah, not Purim, not anything that seems to reflect Simchat Torah, rejoicing with the Torah, because the concept of that Torah reading and the way that we do it now, just like Hanukkah and Purim, are those aspects of our tradition that came along later. But I do find it astonishing to look, not as we did the other morning at the beginning of this particular chapter, but rather at the end. Because at the end, what I find we have actually is the Torah giving us a glimpse, giving us a window and saying our tradition is going to evolve. And it gives us that window, that opportunity, by it describes all of the holidays. It describes Pesach and the counting of the Omer and Shavuot, and very brief descriptions of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippurim, and then descriptions of this larger holiday that is Sukkot, with the 8th day, its own holiday, Shmini Atzeret, as it's now known. And then after mentioning all of those holidays, as you can see in front of you on the screen, in verses 37 and 38, seems to be summing up. These are the Moedim, these are the holidays, the set times of the eternal. You should celebrate them, bring all of the proper sacrifices, apart from Shabbat, and apart from all of the other gifts, offerings, sacrifices, attempts to draw near that you might have. Clearly words of summary. And then, fascinating enough, already in Torah. It goes back, starting in verse 39, with this introductory word, ach. We could do a whole 10 minutes on that word, but I don't want to do that this morning. We'll have to save that for another time. It goes back and talks further about Sukkot, even already having done it. And before, Sukkot was a holiday, no work, sacrifices, all of those basic things. But now we find that the holidays begin to change, or at least the Torah gives us the direction in which they will change, because these holidays that we find in chapter 23 are observances in the Beit HaMikdash, in the central ancient temple in Yerushalayim, and yet they lack, most of them, some kind of ritual formulation and what I would call narrative theology, by which I mean a story that connects us, not just to God, but to the bigger world and to our sense of purpose. So here in verse 39 and 40, we see it says, ach, but, mark, on the 15th day of the 7th month, when you've done your harvest, then you should have 7 days of complete rest and another holiday on the 8th day. And on that first day, now what do we have to do? We have to take the fruit of a beautiful tree, now the etrog, and branches of the palm, that's a lulav in Hebrew, is palm, and boughs of the leafy tree, understood to be myrtle, and willows of the brook. And with those plants you shall rejoice before the eternal your God. And so we have a ritual framework, an opportunity for a ritual done not by the priest on behalf of the individual, but now we're bringing each individual person who's a member of the covenant into an active participatory role in the covenant. That's not something we see in the earlier descriptions. We know that people brought their first fruits to the temple on what is now Shavuot. But here, it is about rejoicing with those ritual elements. And you shall observe it in verse 41 as a festival for 7 days for all times. And now here, it really grows in 42 and 43. You shall live in booths, pasukot teshvu shivat yamim. You shall live in booths 7 days. All the citizens of Israel shall live in booths in Sukkot. Why? Here we go. In order that future generations may know that I made the Israelite people live in Sukkot when I brought them out of the land of Egypt, I, the eternal, your God. So now what are we doing? We are reliving the experience of our ancestors. It says, interestingly enough, what's the meaning of Sukkot? Part of the meaning of this rejoicing and living is that there's a lesson in the fact that our people lived in Sukkot. Now, one doesn't have to have first fruits. One doesn't have to be agriculturally connected in a direct way anymore in order to find a meaningful way to observe this holiday. Our people, agriculturally based in ancient times, as we evolve and grow, our holidays already in Torah evolve and grow. And we have now to remember, to know, and to make other generations know that we lived in Sukkot when God took us out of Egypt. Well, what's the lesson there? And even the variety, our tradition, looking at the traditional commentators, it says, I made you live in Sukkot. Well, what's the message? What is it that we need to know from that time of Sukkot? There are at least 3 different interpretations I found, and I'm going to move them from the most concrete and detailed to the most spiritual and personal. For example, some of the commentators say, I caused you to live in Sukkot. Well, if we look back in the book of Exodus, I don't want to take our time this morning to do that. Where is it as they made their journey? What is the first place that they stopped? Right? They had all these journeys. They had these masot, these journeys in the wilderness, and each one of them is named by a stop. And what's one of the earliest journeys? A place called Sukkot. So maybe for some, this says, let everybody know we have a shared history, that the Jewish people as a whole we have a shared journey, and that we continue that journey even today, never alone. that we continue that journey with our people. And maybe that's one of the messages that we need to know to understand that God made us live in Sukkot. Then again, that's not what most people understand these words to be, or most commentaries understand the words to be. Many say, what is it? It is Sukkot Mamash. They're real Sukkot, like we have temporary dwellings into which we move now during the holiday of Sukkot, that our ancestors wandered in the wilderness for 2 generations, effectively, for 40 years. And so during that time, they had to have these portable, flexible structures, which are a symbol of so many things, of the fragility of life, of our exposure to our larger world. The fact that we have nothing to do with agriculture doesn't mean that we're in any way less connected and dependent upon our physical world and our climate and our environment. And that our ancestors did to remind us that, to some degree, as we've been reminded during this viral outbreak, that what we think gives us security, doesn't necessarily provide the security that we thought it does. So maybe that's why we need to live in and dwell in Sukkot. Or, as quoted by Rashi, so clearly it's an important and central kind of understanding when it says, when the divine voice says, Hoshavti et bnei Yisrael, I caused the people of Israel, in verse 33, to live in Sukkot. What does that mean? It doesn't just mean that we built our own Sukkot, but rather, Rashi says, Ananei kavod, that the sukkah that protected our people in ancient times was that as they traveled forward, they were surrounded on all sides by ananei kavod, by the clouds, the sense of God's presence. That as they moved forward in that physical space, everywhere they were, there was a greater protection, a greater presence, a greater sense of mission and sanctity to everything they did. And so when we live in a sukkah, what we're doing, maybe, according to this third interpretation, is not sitting out on our porch or on our deck or in our backyard in some hut. But what we are doing is changing our experience so that we're aware that at every moment that we are surrounded by care, by love, by spirit, by protection, by whatever you call it, that we would, by remembering the Sukkot, remember that divine Sukkah, that we should be able to say, wow, my life is so much more than I was aware that it was. So that every day we might have that same idea. So all of our holidays have so much more resonance now than just in the simple sacrificial words of this week's parashah. And yet so much of that evolution, of that sense of what we can be and what our tradition wants us to consider, is packed into those simple words and then unpacked or even added in by generation after generation of the commenting chorus of the Jewish people. It challenges us to do the same. It says whether it's a holiday like the coming of Shavuot, or whether it is a moment in time like now that feels so different, it says to us, join in the conversation. What can each of us make out of this moment? What can we learn? Not just that is technical or frightening, but much more. What can we learn that is a message that we would want to pass down? This week's Torah portion really shows us the need to not only have these basic core history and observances that bring us together, but to have and nurture and develop the kind of messages that will speak to those who don't have the experience. People have already started saying to me, what can we put aside so that those who don't remember this moment still have a lesson to learn? While that's a human goal, it is, as we can see in this week's portion, a basic element of what Jewish tradition hopes for us. And so this morning, we turn now from this moment of reflection to an opportunity to express our hopes, to take a moment and to summon to mind those in our family, those in our congregation, our larger community and circle of friends, in need of strength and healing, whether that is the frontline workers or the families of those Canadian Forces volunteers who lost their lives or who are missing in recent days are with them as well. And I especially have in mind a couple of members of Temple, one recently who had surgery and one due to have surgery today. For all of us, these words of healing strength, refuah. Mishiberach Avotenu Abraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov, v'imotenu Sarah Rivka le'A v'Rachel, hu yirapeh kol makotenu, yiratzon milfenecha Adonai Eloheinu, v'hachalimam u'lerapotam, v'yishlach lanu mehera, refuah shlema v'ateret shalom, v'numar. Amen. May the one who blessed our ancestors bless and heal all who suffer. May it be the divine will to provide healing and strength. Reveal to us the holiness of life, the wholeness of shalom, and together we say, Amen. And so having taken this moment together to reflect and to honor those in our world in need of strength or who give strength to us, we now turn to a moment of memory, remembering those who died in recent days and weeks, those who died at this season in years past, and those who we have taken into our hearts with our own. During the last 30 days, we extend our condolences to the families of Lauren Barsky, Hannah Glatter, Ruth Kelman, Marcia Mason, Pauline Milrad, Ovid Benari, and we also remember all victims of violence and terror, including the 22 victims of the mass shooting in Nova Scotia. Additionally, today, it is our sad duty to announce the death of our member Andrew Kosman, husband of Adrian Kosman, father of Alexander and Evan, and brother of Tama Kosman. The funeral will take place graveside Pardes Shalom at the Temple Sinai section at 1 p.m. today. And while Shiva will be observed privately, there will be an additional online gathering for memorial for Andrew. Please reach out to the family if that's something that it would be meaningful for you to participate in. On your site on this day of the 13th of Iyar, the 7th of May in this year, we remember Amy Amelia Amato, Judy Barkin, Harry Berger, Pearlie Kaplan, Max Cohen, Joseph Cantor, Harvey Kotler, Stephen Neil Pollock, Harry Posner, Minnie Saltzman, Esther Schiffman, Max Schveris. Zichronam Livracha, may their memories be a blessing to us. Our griefs and our sympathies are mingled as together we turn to words sanctified by memory, words glorified by hope. Yit gadal v'yit kadash shemei rabba, be'alma divarach eruteh v'yamlich malchuteh, v'chayechon v'yomechon, v'chaye dechol beit Yisrael, v'agala u'bizman kari v'imru amen. Yehe shmei rabba mevarach le'alam u'lalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemedu kudesha b'rechu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechemata ve'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yeheh shlama rabba min shamaya v'chayim alenu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imrumav. Hu ya'aseh shalom alenu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and bring strength and comfort to all who remember. And together we say, Amen. Looking forward to joining you again tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. and then celebrating Shabbat as well. Make today just a great day.